Hi guys, it's time for another quick update on my DIY sailboat refit. In this video I'll show you something here about Obelix, but we'll also take a closer look at the damp ribs I found aboard Athena last weekend, and maybe even attempt a fix. And I've also got a bunch of other stuff I want to show you. But before we get to any of that, I want to mention that I'll be at the boat show in Hamburg in Germany on the 5th of November, and if you see me there, just come up and say hi. It's always fun to meet one of you guys face to face. This is what I wanted to show you here aboard Obelix. The engine is finally back aboard the boat. All the gaskets and seals have been replaced, and she's got a fresh coat of paint. She's looking pretty spiffy for a 43-year-old engine. There's a minor alignment issue and I need a couple of new belts, but other than that she should be good to go. As soon as those things are fixed, I'll celebrate by taking Obelix out for a short sail. But for now, let's just head over to Athena and get started on today's to-do list. Let's go. Last weekend I spent some time checking the hull with my moisture meter, and I found some areas with very high moisture readings. I sketched an outline of those areas onto the hull with a Sharpie, and I think I recognized the shape as being the ribs. But let's head up and take a closer look. But today's going to start out with something, well, not all that interesting, but this is the way most days start out here aboard Athena. And that is with tidying up the boat. Because although Athena is a bigger boat than Obelix, it's still a pretty confined space, and in order for me to get any kind of work done and to keep the dust at bay, well, I need to tidy up quite often. Luckily I've got this magic snap to take care of stuff like that. Ta-da! And... ta-da! And... oh, I'm sorry, sometimes if it's a big mess it takes more than one snap. And there we go. Now that the boat is in a reasonable shape, let's go ahead and take a look at those ribs. Unfortunately, getting to them is going to be a bit of work because they're partly located underneath the starboard side settee, and there's no hatch you can just open and take a look at them, and I could poke one of those small cameras in there that a lot of the comments on the previous video suggested, but that wouldn't really give me all of the information I need. So there's only the hard way. Now, if only I could get a bit of help here. Whoa! Okay, so that's certainly a start. As much as I'd like to convince you guys about the awesome powers of my magic snap, that's not really what happened here. Earlier this week I spent a few hours removing the table that was here and the settee that covered this water tank. I undid the 6 screws securing the table to the cabin sole, and while doing that several of them snapped, but that's very common. I then set out to remove the settee covering the water tank. That was pretty straightforward, although it is quite big, unhandy and very heavy. Finally I could remove part of the cabin sole, and I was rewarded with a surprise of 2 plastic bottles. One with water in it, and one with, well, something else. The water bottle has an expiration date in 1999, so I figured it was placed here by the previous owners during their circumnavigation. And that brings you guys up to date. The reason I put the table and the settee back in place is because I'm not done varnishing yet, but we'll get back to that a little later on in this video. In order for me to take a look at the area of the hull with those high moisture levels, I need to remove some more of the cabin sole. The cabin sole consists of 2 layers of plywood, and this stuff with the teak and holly outer veneer, this stuff is horrendously expensive. It's around $150 per square meter, so I'd like to see if I can salvage this before buying new sheets. I'm not going to bother with trying to remove all of those teak bungs and the screws underneath there because, well, those screws, there's no way of getting them out of there. I learned that lesson with the first pieces of the cabin sole. Instead, I'll be relying on a tiny bit of brute force. Now that I can get a good grip on what's left of those screws, I might as well attempt to remove them. And that is what is left of the screw. All that's left to do now is to get a tiny bit trigger happy, and I guess we'll see what's hiding down there. Well, I'm certainly glad I removed the cabin sole. There's standing water down there, and that's not good. In fact, judging by how the paint is peeled off, I'd say there's been standing water there for a long period of time. So the first step is going to be to just get that water out of there. I'm certainly glad I can get rid of this water, and it kind of answers one of the questions I had when I removed the first piece of the cabin sole. Earlier this week, when I pulled the piece of the cabin sole that sits here, I noticed these cutouts, and I figured, oh great, those are just for draining water, but then I noticed that they're glassed over, so I figured, well, then there must be some other way of draining water. But it turns out there isn't. Any water that gets trapped in these 3 compartments that are closest to the camera, it just sits there until it evaporates. That's not really that great of an idea. This is the other side of the cutout I showed you just a few seconds ago, and you can clearly see that this is just glassed over. At some point I'll have to come up with a way of draining water from those areas, and that could be just as simple as drilling a hole through that fiberglass. But for now I just want to figure out what's the state of those ribs. As expected, the moisture levels are very high, but let's just take it one step further. Great news! The wooden core that's inside of those ribs, well, it's not rotten, it's just wet. So I don't think I need to replace them, but I would like to help them dry out. To help speed up the process of drying out those wooden cores, there's something I want to try. I've drilled a hole through this all the way down to that hole I cut with my hole saw, and the diameter of that hole saw roughly matches the nozzle of my shop vac. My idea is to put the shop vac on a timer and let it run for, let's say, like a minute every hour or so and pull a ton of air through that tiny hole. Now, fair warning, I have absolutely no idea if that will work or not. I think it will, but we'll see. I'll be sure to have an update on the moisture levels in that wooden core for you, let's say next weekend. I spoke with a shipwright earlier this week, and he told me not to be too worried about those high moisture readings, and given the state of that wooden core, I'd certainly say it's not critical. But still, it'll be fun to see if I can dry them out. He also told me that maybe the wooden core was not a part of what actually provides strength, but was merely used as like a mold. But given the thickness of the fiberglass, well, I don't know, but I'll have to show him. For now, let's move on to something completely different. My new port light should show up sometime next week, and if the weather isn't too bad next weekend, I might be able to start removing the old port lights and painting the area up here. I'm very excited about that, but before I can start painting the area up here, I need to finish varnishing the trim pieces. As you can hopefully see here, I'm almost done. 1 or 2 more coats of glossy varnish and I should be ready for the last coat of satin varnish. I had a bit of a setback when I forgot to close the hatch earlier this week after just having applied a coat of varnish. The next day when I came back to check my work, I found hundreds of tiny flies stuck in my fresh coat of varnish. For the first 5.5 seconds, I actually felt kind of sorry for the flies. Then I started feeling sorry for myself. After about 3 hours worth of sanding, the mistake was fixed, and all that's left of it now is all of that sandpaper you saw on the table earlier in this video, so but rest assured I won't forget to close that hatch again anytime soon. In a previous video I showed you guys the sink I've ordered that'll go right here. Well, that sink had a few flaws, and I got a couple of comments suggesting that I should just grind out those mistakes. Well, first off, if I'm paying almost $200 for a sink, I'm not gonna take a grinder to it. And second, it wouldn't have been easy for me to fix those mistakes. The sink is made up of 2 separate sinks that are welded together, and those 2 sinks, well, they weren't parallel, so that would be quite difficult to fix. Well, long story short, the new sink should hopefully show up next week. Meanwhile, these showed up. These are the filters I'll use for my drinking water. I'm planning on mounting these in the locker underneath the sink, so hopefully next weekend I'll be able to cut the hole for the sink and to mount these. That will go a long ways towards finishing the galley. I am thinking about mounting the day tank for the reflex stove in that area underneath the sink also, but I'll kind of need all of the pieces of the puzzle before I can figure that out. Speaking of finishing the galley, I wanted to show you this. This of course is the piece that goes right here in front of the fridge, and I've been working on this for the past couple of weeks. I've got 3 coats of paint on there right now, so it's not done yet, but this should give you a good idea of what the color is going to look like. I've reinforced the back of this with some fiberglass. I'd already mixed up some epoxy, and rather than letting that go to waste, I just decided to reinforce this. So once I've got a few more coats on this, well, it should be good to go. I've spent a lot of extra energy making sure that that piece that goes in front of the fridge is going to be removable. If I just fiberglass something in place and slap some paint on it, it'll be a lot quicker. But I wanted to make sure that that piece was removable because I think it's going to help me out a lot when I decide to hook up radiators to my reflex stove. But that is a job for next summer. This video is going to be kind of short. I'm still waiting for the sink to show up and those port lights, so there's not really a lot left for me to film aboard the boat today. Instead of just droning on, I figured I'd better get busy shooting the next video, the test of these LEDs here. If I manage to shoot this video today, well then there's going to be an extra video this coming week, so fingers crossed. Before ending this video, I want to wish a very happy birthday to Thomas. And Thomas, if you haven't already, then go ahead and open the box I've sent you. Okay guys, that is gonna be it for this video. See you! Yukul and I hope you've enjoyed this video. For more videos like it, click subscribe. Please consider leaving a comment and a thumbs up. It really helps me a lot and I appreciate your support very much. If you're new to the channel, please check out the introduction playlist. If you want to watch every single video I've ever published, check out the playlist named All Videos. It contains every single video listed in chronological order.